When the quest for the perfect selfie turns fatal, the ocean strikes without mercy. From a supermodel dragged under by a great white to a vlogger mauled by a mako, these chilling encounters reveal how vanity and thrill-seeking collide with nature's raw power. Divers, surfers, and tourists all chasing the perfect shot, faced predators faster than fear itself. In this video, we'll uncover 6 shocking true stories where one photo cost everything. On August 14, 2023, the air around Gansbai shimmered with sunlight as the private yacht Aurora drifted calmly over the Atlantic swells. On board, supermodel Alessia Marquez stood at the center of attention. At just 27, she was one of the most famous faces in the world, known for her beauty, charm, and millions of followers who adored every photo she shared. She had built her career through passion and discipline, rising from humble beginnings in Barcelona to global fame. The trip to South Africa was meant to be a reward after a long campaign shoot, a chance to relax and celebrate surrounded by friends and the crystal blue sea she loved so much. The yacht glided gently near the coastline, where the horizon stretched endlessly. The water was so clear that the crew could see glints of fish darting below. Music played softly from the deck while guests laughed, took pictures, and shared drinks. Alessia, radiant in a flowing white cover-up, leaned against the railing, her golden hair blowing in the breeze. She had always been drawn to the camera, to capturing perfect moments. And even now, after hours of celebration, her instincts as a model never left her. Every wave, every glimmer of sunlight felt like a chance for another photo to share with her fans. As the afternoon went on, she decided she wanted one last image, a dramatic selfie with the sea stretching behind her. Ignoring quiet warnings from the crew about the local shark population, she climbed carefully down the small ladder onto the yacht's swim platform. The others watched from above, some amused, others uneasy, as she positioned herself at the edge. The sun painted the sky gold, and the calmness of the ocean made it seem safe. But the beauty of Gansbai's waters was deceptive. Beneath the shimmering surface, a 5.5-meter great white shark was patrolling the area, drawn by the faint sounds and vibrations of the yacht. It moved in wide, slow circles, its pale belly gliding silently through the deep green water. Alessia crouched on the platform, angling her phone for the perfect frame. As she leaned forward, a sudden swell lifted the yacht slightly, causing the surface to shift beneath her feet. Her balance faltered, and with one small slip she fell into the cold Atlantic. The water swallowed her in an instant, sending ripples outward across the still surface. Laughter from the deck turned to panic. Crew members shouted as they saw her resurface, struggling to stay afloat. Then, within seconds, the water beneath her seemed to explode. The enormous great white surged upward with unimaginable force, its jaws wide as it clamped onto her torso. A flash of white and red filled the air as waves crashed against the platform. The predator's strike was fast, violent, and absolute. The crew rushed to throw ropes, poles, and anything that could help, but the sea was already stained a dark color. The shark vanished for a moment, only to return, circling just below the surface. The next lunge came even harder, the water boiling as the massive body twisted and disappeared once more into the depths. The screams faded into stunned silence, and the calm blue that surrounded the yacht only moments before had turned into a scene of chaos and shock. The calm that followed was haunting. The sea around the yacht rippled quietly again, as if nothing had happened. Small waves brushed against the platform where Alessia had stood just moments before. Pieces of fabric drifted slowly on the surface, turning in gentle circles as the crew stared in disbelief. The silence was heavy, broken only by the sound of the water lapping against the hull. Everyone remained frozen, struggling to understand how the celebration had changed into horror in mere seconds. A call was made for immediate help as nearby boats turned toward the scene. The guests on board tried to scan the water, their eyes searching for any sign of movement, but all they saw was a faint trail fading into the deep blue. The rescue boats arrived quickly, bringing divers and emergency responders. They entered the sea carefully, aware that the predator could still be nearby. The water was dark, with disturbed sand, and visibility was reduced to almost nothing. They searched the surrounding area for nearly an hour, finding only small scraps of material and a floating phone that had once held the last photos she had taken. When the divers finally surfaced, the look on their faces said everything. The search was called off shortly after, with only fragments of her clothing and a few pieces of torn equipment recovered. The sea had taken everything else. The yacht was towed slowly back toward the harbor, its deck scattered with towels, overturned drinks, and phones lying forgotten on the ground. The joy that had filled the air only hours earlier was gone, replaced by a deep, unbearable stillness. News of the tragedy spread rapidly, Within hours, it appeared across every major network, and social media was flooded with shock and sorrow. Millions of fans posted messages of grief, unable to believe that someone so full of life had vanished so suddenly. Photos of her final trip were shared widely, showing her smiling, carefree, and unaware of the danger waiting below. Experts began to speak publicly about the risks of open water photography in shark-prone regions, explaining how even small movements near the surface could attract large predators. In Gansbai, locals were shaken but not surprised. They had long known the waters to be home to some of the largest sharks on Earth, especially during the warmer months when fish and seals gathered near the coast. To them, the sea was beautiful but merciless. It gave people peace and wonder, but it demanded respect in return. The private yacht was moored at the marina for days, its white sides faintly marked with salt and stains from the waves. Visitors left flowers on the dock nearby, creating a quiet memorial that grew larger each morning. The crew who had witnessed the attack struggled to return to the ocean, many saying they could still hear the sound of the splash and see the flash of white beneath the water. Alessia's story became a lasting warning for those who seek beauty without caution. What began as a moment of confidence ended as a stark reminder of nature's power. The ocean had given her fame and joy throughout her career, yet in a single moment of stillness it had claimed her completely, leaving behind only calm waves and silence stretching to the horizon. On July 14, 2021, Daniel Ruiz, a 32-year-old adventure lover from Miami, woke early with one goal in mind: to capture a thrilling photo that would go viral online. Known among his friends for his fearless nature and love for fast machines, Daniel often spent weekends chasing excitement. From skydiving to cliff jumping, he lived for moments that made his heart race. His latest obsession was jet skiing, and he had recently bought a bright red watercraft to explore Florida's coastlines. He enjoyed the rush of speeding over waves and had grown confident enough to attempt daring stunts for social media. That morning, the sky was clear, the water calm, and Daniel saw the perfect chance to make his next big post. He and two friends headed toward a mangrove channel near Miami, a spot popular with tourists and local thrill seekers. Warning signs along the docks cautioned against entering certain shallow zones due to shark activity, but Daniel barely noticed. He had read stories of people capturing breathtaking photos while balancing on their jet skis, and he wanted one of his own. With the sun shining and his phone secured in a waterproof case, he powered up the jet ski and roared into the open water. At first, everything seemed perfect. The waves shimmered under the morning light, and the air was filled with the hum of the engine. Daniel raced across the surface, carving turns and splashing through shallow water near the mangroves. His friends watched from a nearby craft, filming him with their phones. Each pass became bolder, the engine louder, the splashes higher. He leaned closer to the water, extending his arm to capture the right angle. The moment felt effortless, and adrenaline surged through him as he lined up the shot he had been imagining all morning. Then, without warning, the jet ski jolted violently. The front end dipped as if it had been caught by something beneath the surface. Daniel lost balance instantly and tumbled headfirst into the water. His phone spun out of his hand, vanishing below. For a split second, his friends laughed, thinking it was part of the act. But then the ocean surface broke apart around him in an explosion of foam and water. A massive shape surged upward, cutting through the waves. A 3.3-meter bull shark, drawn by the splashing and engine noise, struck with astonishing speed. It slammed into Daniel's leg with brutal force, teeth sinking deep into flesh. The impact sent shockwaves through his body. He kicked and thrashed, his scream echoing across the channel. Blood spread through the clear water in a red cloud as the predator shook him from side to side, testing its hold. Panic gripped everyone watching. Daniel tried to push away, grabbing at the side of his overturned jet ski. The shark circled again, its dorsal fin slicing through the surface. He could feel the water vibrating with each turn as the creature passed close enough for its rough skin to brush against his arm. The mangroves swayed nearby, silent witnesses to the chaos. His friends sped toward him, their engines roaring as they closed the distance. Daniel's strength was fading. His leg was torn and bleeding heavily. The predator lunged once more, bumping the jet ski's hull before slipping beneath the waves again. The friends reached him just in time, stretching their arms to haul him from the water. His body was trembling, the salt water stinging his wounds. The sea that had seemed calm minutes earlier now churned with fear and foam as the shark's dark shadow disappeared into the depths below. As Daniel's friends pulled him onto the second jet ski, the full extent of his injuries became clear. His leg was torn deeply from the bite, muscle and skin shredded where the shark's jaws had clamped down. Salt water mixed with blood running down the side of the craft as they held him steady. His face was pale, his breathing shallow, and his body shivered from shock. Every wave hit the side of the jet ski, rocking it gently, while the mangrove channel around them remained eerily silent. The once clear water was now streaked with faint trails of red that slowly spread outward. The men acted fast, using a towel to tie a makeshift bandage around the wound to slow the bleeding. One of them steered the jet ski toward shore at full speed, while the other kept pressure on Daniel's leg. The trip back felt endless, the minutes stretching as the engine roared through the still air. Behind them, the water rippled occasionally, as if something large moved beneath the surface, but the shark did not return. The mangroves faded into the distance as they approached the dock, where several people were already gathering, alerted by the noise and the distant cries for help. When they reached land, hands reached out to help lift Daniel from the craft. The dock became a blur of motion as bystanders rushed to bring towels, belts, and first aid kits. Someone called for emergency services while others tried to keep him conscious. His eyes fluttered as pain pulsed through his body, and his hands gripped the dock boards weakly. The sound of the sirens grew louder, breaking through the quiet hum of the harbor. Paramedics rushed in, cutting through the towels to assess the wound, then lifted him onto a stretcher. Within minutes, he was inside the ambulance, racing toward the nearest trauma center in Miami. Doctors worked quickly once he arrived. The bite had torn through tissue and exposed bone, but his arteries were intact. Hours of surgery followed, as teams cleaned and repaired the wound, carefully removing damaged muscle and sealing the deep gashes. He survived, but the attack left lasting scars, both physical and emotional. The leg would take months to heal, and some damage would remain permanent. The story spread rapidly through local news and social media, shocking many who had seen Daniel's previous videos online. Experts explained that the noise and splashing from jet skis often attract sharks, especially bull sharks, which are known to investigate disturbances in shallow water. They said the movement of his arm while taking photos might have looked like a struggling fish to the predator. The warnings that had been ignored now carried a grim new meaning. In the weeks that followed, Daniel's photo from that day, the one he had been trying to take, was never found, lost somewhere beneath the waves. However, his story spread far, shared as a cautionary lesson about how easily risk can turn into danger. Beaches near the mangrove channels began posting new signs with bright red lettering, reminding riders to avoid feeding or attracting wildlife in those zones. Months later, Daniel returned to the water, though never alone. The scar along his leg remained, a reminder of the day when a simple thrill turned into a fight for life. The sea still shimmered beautifully under the sun, but he viewed it differently now, as a place that demanded respect, not spectacle. On March 16, 2025, the golden morning light touched the beaches of Maui as soft waves rolled across the sand. The ocean shimmered under the sun, calm, yet filled with hidden power beneath its surface. Among the many beachgoers that day was 29-year-old Chloe Turner, a travel influencer who loved adventure more than anything. From her early years, she had always been drawn to the sea. Growing up near the California coast, she spent her weekends learning how to surf, paddleboard, and dive. Over time, she turned her passion for the ocean into her career, sharing pictures and videos from beaches around the world. Her bright smile and daring nature made her popular online, and every trip became an opportunity for something new and exciting. That morning, Chloe planned to film a short video for her followers. The sky was clear, and the turquoise water seemed perfect for the shot she had in mind. The beach was crowded with families, surfers, and tourists enjoying the day. Lifeguards made announcements reminding swimmers to stay near shore because of recent shark activity in the area, but Chloe felt confident. She had paddleboarded hundreds of times and knew how to handle herself in the water. With her friends recording from the beach, she pushed her board gently over the small waves, heading about 50 meters from the sand where the view was most beautiful. The ocean surface was glassy, reflecting the bright sky above. Chloe smiled and balanced easily as she held her phone, adjusting the camera angle for a perfect selfie with the waves behind her. Just as she leaned forward, something below caught her attention. A faint, dark shadow moved under her board, slow, steady, and larger than anything she had ever seen. Before she could react, the water erupted with violent force. A 4.2-meter tiger shark surged upward from the depths, its massive jaws clamping onto her thigh in a crushing bite. The impact threw her off balance, and she fell hard into the churning sea. The pain was instant and searing, spreading through her leg as the predator twisted with terrifying strength. The water turned red around her, foam and spray filling the air. Chloe kicked and pushed, struggling to stay above the surface as the shark pulled her downward. Its striped body circled with fierce precision, bumping her board aside as it prepared for another strike. The once calm ocean had transformed into a scene of chaos and panic. From the shore, her friends and nearby surfers saw the commotion. They rushed toward her, paddling fast and calling for help, while lifeguards grabbed rescue poles and launched a jet ski. The predator circled again, brushing against her body before turning away briefly. Every second felt endless as blood clouded the turquoise water. Chloe's strength began to fade, her hands reaching toward her drifting board. The rescuers were getting closer, but the predator had not gone far. The water rippled again, and shadows beneath the surface hinted that the danger was not yet over. The lifeguards reached her within seconds that felt like hours. The jet ski cut through the waves as one of them extended a rescue pole toward her drifting body. The water around Chloe was thick with foam and red swirls, her board floating a few meters away. The shark made one last pass beneath them, its wide shadow sliding under the surface before vanishing into the deeper blue. The rescuers pulled her onto the sled behind the jet ski and sped toward the beach, leaving a trail of bubbles and churned water in their wake. On the shore, people rushed to clear space while others stood frozen, staring at the shocking scene. The lifeguards lifted Chloe from the water, her leg covered in deep wounds. Blood soaked the sand as towels and first aid kits appeared in the hands of those who rushed to help. One guard wrapped a strap around her thigh to slow the bleeding while another checked her pulse and breathing. Her face was pale, her eyes half open, her breath quick and shallow. The ocean that had once been her playground now stretched behind her, calm again, as if nothing had happened. An ambulance arrived within minutes, sirens echoing against the cliffs. Paramedics moved quickly, stabilizing her as they loaded her onto a stretcher. The crowd watched silently, the laughter and music that had filled the beach now replaced by whispers and disbelief. The jet ski returned, dragging in her damaged paddleboard. The fin bent, the side marked with a long scrape where the shark's body had collided. It was a chilling reminder of the creature's immense power. At the hospital, surgeons worked for hours to repair her damaged leg. The bite had torn deep into muscle and nerves, leaving scars that would never fade. The doctor said she was lucky to be alive. One more second underwater and she might not have survived the blood loss. Days later, news of the attack spread across the island, drawing attention from tourists and the media. Experts reminded people that tiger sharks often patrol nearshore waters in Maui, especially during early morning and late afternoon hours. They explained that bright reflections, splashing, and movement on the surface could easily attract a curious predator. Weeks passed before Chloe was able to walk again with help. Her recovery was long and painful, but her spirit remained strong. She began to share her story, not to chase views or fame this time, but to warn others about how quickly beauty could turn dangerous in the sea. The ocean she once loved so deeply had nearly taken everything from her. The lifeguards who rescued her were honored for their fast response, and new safety signs were added along the beach. Visitors were urged to avoid filming or venturing too far from shore, especially when shark sightings were reported. The selfie Chloe had wanted was never captured, but her survival became a lasting reminder of her life. The same waves that sparkle under sunlight can hide shadows waiting just beneath, silent, swift, and always watching. On April 17, 2019, the sun rose over the South African coast, casting golden light across the restless waters of Gansbaai. The small harbor buzzed with excitement as a group of tourists prepared for a day most people only dreamed about, seeing a great white shark face to face. Among them stood 31-year-old Liam Foster, a passionate photographer from Melbourne known for his daring adventures and fearless pursuit of dramatic images. From cliffs to coral reefs, he had built a career on capturing the raw power of nature. But this time, he wanted something more, a photograph that would stand out above all others. Since childhood, Liam had been fascinated by the ocean and its predators. He had spent years diving, swimming, and traveling to document marine wildlife. His followers admired his boldness and the way he placed himself close to danger for the perfect shot. Yet his confidence often blurred the line between bravery and risk. When he signed up for the Gansbaai cage diving expedition, it was supposed to be another thrilling chapter in his portfolio, a close encounter with the ocean's most feared hunter. That morning the sea was calm, the surface glimmering under the bright sun. The crew loaded equipment while participants suited up in thick wetsuits. The air was filled with nervous laughter and anticipation. Soon the boat pushed off from the dock, heading toward an area known for frequent shark activity. The water grew deeper and darker as they dropped anchor near the feeding ground. Chum, a mix of fish oil and bait, was poured into the sea to attract the predators from below. Within minutes, fins began to appear. Massive shadows glided beneath the waves, circling slowly. their movements both curious and deliberate. The first divers entered the steel cage one by one, gripping the bars as bubbles rose around them. Liam was among them, camera tightly secured in his hand, heart pounding with excitement. From behind the metal barrier, he watched the enormous shapes move closer, each pass revealing flashes of gray muscle and teeth. The water shimmered as a 5.6-meter great white emerged from the deep, its size dwarfing the cage. The shark's movements were powerful, yet smooth, its tail cutting through the current with grace. It circled, studied, and occasionally bumped the steel bars, testing its surroundings. The crew above called out for calm, reminding everyone to stay inside the cage with their arms close to their bodies. But Liam wanted a closer angle. As the shark drifted just below, he carefully extended his phone through the gap between the bars, aiming to capture the creature gliding beneath him. The sunlight caught the glint of his device, and for a brief second the sea seemed to pause. Then, in one explosive motion, the shark surged upward. Its snout struck the cage with incredible force, the metal groaning as one bar bent slightly outward. Liam's extended arm was caught in that instant, clamped by the shark's powerful jaws. The water erupted in a burst of foam and red as the predator thrashed violently, pulling him against the steel barrier. His camera tumbled from his grasp and vanished into the swirling current as he screamed silently through his regulator. Crew members above shouted for assistance, hammering on the side of the cage and pulling at his harness. The water turned murky as the shark twisted, shaking the prey as if it were a leaf. The force of its movement rattled the entire structure, bubbles rushing upward in a torrent, and then, just as suddenly as it had attacked, the predator released. The great white vanished into the deep, leaving behind a cloud of blood and shattered silence. Liam floated limp inside the cage, his arm mangled and his body motionless. Crew members rushed to pull Liam out of the water as the sea around the cage turned dark with blood. His body was limp, his wetsuit shredded, and one side of the cage was bent inward from the massive impact. Every second felt slow and heavy as the team worked in a state of panic. They lifted him onto the deck, laying him flat against the boards. His arm was torn badly, bones visible through deep cuts, his skin pale against the harsh sunlight. The quiet hum of the ocean was replaced by the sound of rushing feet, frantic shouts, and the whir of medical equipment. The captain called for immediate evacuation, steering the boat toward shore as others worked to stop the bleeding. Bandages, towels, and ropes were used to apply pressure while the waves slapped against the hull. The sea that had seemed so calm earlier now felt hostile and endless. Tourists stood frozen in shock, their excitement replaced by disbelief and fear. The shark that had attacked disappeared completely, leaving only drifting bubbles and torn pieces of equipment floating in the current. Within half an hour, the boat reached the harbor where paramedics were waiting. They carried Liam on a stretcher, his body trembling from blood loss and shock. The sun was high now, its warmth contrasting with the cold tension that hung over the dock. He was rushed to the nearest hospital in Hermanus, where emergency teams prepared for surgery. The injuries were severe: deep bite wounds, muscle torn, and major arteries damaged. Doctors worked tirelessly to stabilize him, their faces set with grim focus. News of the attack spread quickly through the town and then across the country. Gansbai, known for its shark tourism, had always emphasized safety. But this event shook even the most experienced divers and guides. Experts analyzed the incident, concluding that the great white had likely reacted to the quick movement of Liam's phone and arm, mistaking it for prey. The flash of light and sudden motion had triggered a hunting response, an instinct older than human memory. Liam survived the surgery but remained in critical condition for days. His injuries left him permanently scarred, and his right arm could not be fully saved. When he finally regained strength, the weight of what had happened settled in. The moment of risk, the decision made for a single photograph, had cost him more than he could have imagined. His career as an adventure photographer changed forever, replaced by long months of recovery and reflection. The cage diving company temporarily halted operations to review safety measures and reinforce its protocols. Stronger cages were installed, with smaller gaps between bars and stricter supervision for participants. Warnings were posted, reminding everyone that even a simple mistake in predator territory could have irreversible consequences. In the months that followed, Liam became a quiet advocate for marine awareness, speaking not from pride, but from experience. His story became a sobering reminder that the ocean demanded respect, a place of beauty and danger where a single moment of carelessness could turn awe into tragedy. On May 11, 2025, the early light shimmered across the waves near the Outer Banks, as adventure vlogger Ryan Parker prepared for what he believed would be his most daring underwater video yet. At 27 years old, Ryan had built a large online following by capturing breathtaking moments from the ocean, from coral dives to encounters with dolphins and rays. His love for the sea began when he was a child, exploring tide pools with his father, and over time it evolved into a passion for storytelling through film. The thrill of risk had always been part of his identity. Every video he made carried that extra edge, something that would make viewers hold their breath. That morning, Ryan and his dive partner Chris motored out toward a known tuna migration route where large bait balls formed beneath the surface. Local guides had warned divers to stay away from the feeding grounds, but Ryan wanted a unique shot, one where fast-moving fish glimmered behind him as he floated motionless with his camera. The sea looked calm, the air crisp, and the morning sun reflected in silver flashes across the waves. Ryan adjusted his gear, checked his camera rig, and slid quietly into the deep blue water. Below him, schools of tuna darted in tight circles, scattering flashes of silver light as they fed on smaller fish. The scene was hypnotic, full of movement and energy. Ryan hovered a few meters above, holding his breath and extending the camera outward. The water shimmered with life, but it also hid something much larger watching from below. Unseen in the growing shadows, a short-fin mako shark patrolled the edges of the bait ball. Sleek, powerful, and built for speed, the chaos of fleeing fish drew the predator. When Ryan kicked to adjust his position, the flicker of his fins mimicked the frantic motion of prey. The shark's predatory instinct triggered instantly. From the depths, it launched upward like a silver missile. Ryan never saw the first strike coming. In an instant, the mako surged through the water, its jaws wide open. The impact was violent and sudden, a blur of speed and power that tore through his lower leg. The bite sliced deep, shredding flesh and muscle before the predator veered away in a flash of motion. Blood filled the water in red streaks, spiraling upward in clouds that caught the sunlight. Ryan's body twisted from the shock as pain exploded through his leg. The sea that had been calm moments ago now churned with chaos. His camera drifted downward as he struggled to push upward toward the surface. The mako turned sharply and circled again, its body glinting in the dim light. It darted closer, testing the movement in the water and assessing whether its target was still prey. Ryan's dive partner noticed the commotion and kicked toward him, cutting through the current with urgent speed. He grabbed Ryan under the arms, dragging him toward the boat as the predator continued to weave nearby. The surface broke with splashes as they reached the ladder, water red and foaming around them. The shark's shadow lingered below, fading slowly into the deep as Ryan's strength began to slip away. As Ryan was lifted from the water, his leg throbbed with pain and his vision blurred from blood loss. His dive partner hauled him onto the deck, where he collapsed against the floor, gasping for air. The once peaceful ocean now looked wild and dark, the foam around the boat tinted with a deep red. The mako's shadow still drifted below, moving in slow, circling patterns, before it finally slipped away into the deep, leaving only silence and floating bubbles behind. Chris grabbed the emergency kit and wrapped thick fabric around the wound to slow the bleeding. The gashes were deep, muscle torn apart in wide grooves, and Ryan's wetsuit was shredded. The small vessel sped toward the nearest harbor, cutting across waves that slammed hard against the hull. Every jolt sent a surge of pain through his body, but he kept breathing, fighting to stay awake as the shore slowly came into view. Rescue crews met them at the dock within minutes. Paramedics lifted him onto a stretcher, stabilizing his leg as they raced toward the hospital. The air inside the ambulance was cold and filled with the sound of machines beeping in rhythm with his heart. Hours later, surgeons worked to clean and close the wound, managing to save his leg after a long procedure. His recovery would take months, but he had survived what few could. News of the attack spread quickly across social media and diving communities. Experts explained that the bright movement of fins near bait balls often triggered predatory strikes from makos, known for their incredible speed and precision. The event sparked conversations about safety among freedivers and photographers who sought close encounters with marine predators for content. Weeks later, Ryan shared an update from his hospital bed, reflecting on how a moment meant for thrill and beauty turned into a near tragedy. He had gone in search of an image few had captured, and instead faced the full force of the ocean's power. His story became a reminder that the sea's calm surface hides swift danger, and that even a second of misjudgment can blur the line between adventure and survival. On February 9, 2020, 29-year-old wildlife photographer Sophie Green stepped aboard a small tour vessel off Bremer Bay, Australia. She had spent years chasing rare marine moments through her lens, traveling from icy polar waters to the warm coasts of the Indian Ocean. Her passion for wildlife began in childhood when she first saw a documentary about whales. Since then, her life had revolved around capturing animals in their natural world. The trip that morning was part of a seasonal tour, where pods of orcas were often spotted hunting and socializing in the deep waters offshore. For Sophie, it was the perfect chance to capture an image that would stand out among her growing collection. The day started calmly. The sea shimmered under a bright blue sky, and a light wind brushed across the water. Dozens of seabirds circled above as the small vessel cut through the waves. Sophie stood near the edge of the upper deck, camera in one hand and her phone in the other, watching for signs of movement. Soon, someone spotted the dark shapes of orcas slicing through the surface. A pod of at least 6, gliding gracefully alongside the boat. The crew slowed the vessel to keep a respectful distance while allowing passengers to take photos. The orcas surfaced rhythmically, their black and white bodies shining in the sun. Sophie felt her excitement rise. The images she could take here would be priceless. She wanted one perfect shot, not from behind the railing but from closer to the water. Ignoring the guide's earlier warning to stay on the upper deck, she moved quietly toward the lower swim platform at the stern. The surface there was slick from sea spray, but she barely noticed. Kneeling, she leaned outward, phone extended toward the pod that drifted near the boat. Her reflection shimmered across the water as she framed herself with the massive animals below. Then, without warning, a swell rolled beneath the vessel. The sudden movement threw her off balance. Her foot slipped, and she plunged waist-deep into the icy sea. The splash echoed across the quiet bay. Instantly, the nearby orcas reacted. The water rippled as one veered sharply toward the disturbance. Its massive head broke the surface, followed by a powerful sweep of its tail that sent waves crashing against the hull. The sudden commotion jolted everyone on board. Crew members shouted as they rushed to the back of the vessel. Sophie clung desperately to the slippery platform, struggling to lift herself back up. Another orca surfaced just meters away, its dorsal fin slicing the water before it rammed the platform with enormous force. The entire boat rocked violently, the impact sending sprays of water across the deck. Sophie's arms burned from the effort as she tried to pull herself higher, but the slick metal made it nearly impossible. The same orca circled again, its body moving beneath the surface like a shadow. Then a second one appeared beside it, nudging Sophie's leg with enough strength to unsteady her grip. Her soaked clothes clung to her skin and cold waves washed over her as she struggled to hold on. The power of the ocean and the animals around her became terrifyingly real in that moment. One slip away from disaster. The water churned as the orca passed beneath her once more, its massive body brushing the platform. The motion sent her sliding sideways, fingers barely holding onto the slick metal edge. Foam swirled around her legs as the sea grew restless, the pod moving in close formation. Every shadow below seemed alive, every ripple a warning of power waiting just beneath. The vessel rocked with each passing second, the engines humming as the crew scrambled to act. One of them threw a rope down, shouting for her to grab it, while others leaned over with poles, trying to steady her trembling form. A sudden current pulled at her feet as another orca glided past, brushing her arm in a slow, deliberate motion. It felt like both a warning and a test. The force nearly dragged her under again, but her hand caught the rope just in time. Her arm shook from the strain as she clung tightly, her breath coming in short bursts. The men above hauled her upward with all their strength, lifting her from the water as the orcas drifted away, their sleek shapes vanishing back into the deep. Within seconds, she was sprawled on the wet deck, gasping and shaking, salt water streaming from her hair and clothes. The sea around them grew calm again, the surface smooth except for faint ripples where the animals had disappeared. The passengers stood frozen, wide-eyed, still absorbing what they had seen. Sophie's knees were scraped and her leg bore dark bruises where the orca had pushed against her, but she was alive. Crew members wrapped her in a blanket as the boat turned toward shore, the morning's excitement replaced by a heavy silence. Later that evening, the story spread quickly across the harbor, a reminder of how close she had come to danger. Experts who reviewed the video explained that orcas, though intelligent and often gentle, can respond unpredictably when startled or approached too closely. For Sophie, the encounter became a lasting lesson. The sea she once viewed through a lens now carried a deeper weight, a place of beauty, power, and respect earned through survival.